Hello and welcome to another Collecting Addicts podcast. A bit of housekeeping to start with. First of all, I sound like I've got a cold because I've got a cold. I caught it on an aircraft yesterday. I spent 14 hours and 45 minutes on a new Airbus A350. That's a world record for me. I've never been in a plane for that long. I don't want to repeat the experience. Edward Lovett isn't here because he's not very well, but he also has to be skiing. I'm not sure about that, Edward, but I think you are well. So Godspeed, and I hope you do well. But the most important news is that today it was announced that Lilt is being rebranded in the UK. If you watch this in the UK, they've taken one of the great fizzy pop drinks and removed its name. So this whole day has been shattered for me, and I'm going to do my best to get through this podcast because the totally tropical taste is no longer with us. First up, we're going to start with our imaginary two-car garage. This has already spiraled completely out of control. So I'll read you this missive, which is like a Robert Browning monologue on my phone. Here we go. By Neil Clifford. Our man, I assume he's a man, is a very successful 35-year-old Manchester-based entrepreneur. He sold a stake in his IT consultancy business. He's worked pretty much 7 days a week since leaving uni and has always been a massive petrolhead. His number one dream has always been to buy his perfect two-car garage. He set himself a budget of £150,000. He doesn't have any kids. Doesn't have any dogs. He loves track days. He's just completing his ARDS course. That's how you train to become a racer driver and get your license. And he does some Euro driving holidays with his partner during the summer months. So let's open. Well, it's yours, Neil, because you wrote this. You thought about it more than us. So go on.
Yes. Well, we all know this guy. He's an avid user of piston heads. He's been planning this two-car garage since he left university. He's worked his arse off. He's been considering all the logical approaches to this for almost 10 years. So it's all going to be about logic. But obviously he wants the best cars, and he knows them from his 5-star Evo studies. It's going to be two things, pretty obvious things. I'm sure we've all chosen the same cars, actually. The first one will be his sports car. He also doesn't want to lose any money. You know, he's shrewd with his finances. He doesn't want any depreciation.
Can I ask one question? Am I assuming that he's lived with his mother to accrue this sum of money? He's not interested in property.
No. He lives in a loft apartment in central Manchester. He's very successful. Yeah, he's very successful. But he doesn't want to lose a pound on these cars. And he doesn't want to break down. So it's difficult because he wants no depreciation and no calling the AA. So it's going to be Honda again. It's going to be a Honda NSX, hopefully the facelift model, although they've gone crazy in price and difficult to find. There's never any on Piston Heads or Auto Trader, or in fact collecting cars, I should mention. So he would go facelift NSX. It's probably almost 100 grand now, maybe more if you can find one. But that would be the car. He'd keep it forever. It'd be buried in it. It would never break down, and it would get massive admiration going to, you know, the usual car meets that we all go to. The second car, again, would be completely logical. He wants a track day car. There's only one track day car. It's a Caterham. He's not going to lose any money because when I wanted to buy a Caterham 20 years ago, they were 25 grand. They're still 25 grand for the same car. So he won't lose any money. He'll probably buy the kit. He'll build it. He'll build it for 6 months. I don't know which one, whether it's R300 or 400 or 420 or 600. I don't understand the Caterham models anymore.
It's somewhere in there.
But it's somewhere in there. So it's an NSX facelift and a Caterham R300 in kit form. That's what you would do. Okay.
I've got some questions, Neil.
Yeah, my bloke doesn't sound like that.
I've got some questions here. First of all, I love the spread here. I have to go on record, and this is heresy, as saying that I've always found the NSX disappointing to drive. It hasn't got a diff, so it does a one tyre fire every time you come out of a tight corner. The brakes are made of anchor butter, and the steering was very weird on those facelift cars. However, the engine and gearbox are about as good as anything ever made, and you've got a funny feeling that it will outlast any other vehicle. It's just a gorgeous thing. So I hope he's not going to be disappointed by some of the dynamic shortcomings of the NSX that aren't widely publicized. My other question is, Caterham, does he need something to tow it with? Should his other vehicle allow him to tow it, or is he going to put a bar on the NSX?
No, he's going to drive the Caterham to the track day.
Yeah.
He's going to drive it. He's
Once.
Once. Once.
Okay.
No, he's going to drive the Caterham. He's a pretty ballsy guy. He's happy to get wet. He's not stressed about that. He's, as long as he doesn't lose money and as long as he doesn't break down.
Okay. Well, I think you've nailed all criteria. Manish, what are you going for?
I think he is the Michael Schumacher generation of 35-year-olds. This is the guy he's seen winning week in, week out. And I think he's always fancied a Ferrari. And I think exactly as Neil said, this is a guy who doesn't want to lose a penny in depreciation, but he wants a car that he thinks he's Michael Schumacher in when he buys it. And there is only one car that he could do that with, and that's the 550 Maranello. He's going to buy a Ferrari 550 Maranello. I had terrible schizophrenia about the color here. I thought if he was going classy metallic blue with black leather inside, or would he go tan and red? But I think it's a 550 Maranello, because when he gets into that, it's about, I had a quick look, somewhere between, you get a decent one for somewhere between 80 and 110,000 pounds, 90 being a sweetish spot, 55,000 miles, he's going to do some work on it himself. So that is his going around Europe with his girlfriend, no dog car. And I think his track car is going to be a Lotus Elise Sport 240 Final Edition. I think he's going to have 50 or 60,000 pounds. You can buy it. So add the two together, about 150.
I
love that.
We started this is a very strong opening, you two. I have to say, I am. There's a lot of man love here. I'm nodding like a teacher who's just seen his pupils smash a spelling test out of the park. So that little Lotus Elise, what a great car as well. In fact, that excites me more than the Fandango at the moment.
Yeah, that is nice.
They just weigh nothing, and they're little, and they're perfectly balanced, and they make a great noise, and they've just got a 6-speed gearbox, and it's just a motor racing car. Really, I love it.
I almost went Exige Mark 1.
Indeed.
It's a tricky car.
But I think,
if this guy's 35 and he's been working all God's hours, never been on track before, the first thing he's going to do with the Mark 1 Exige is crash it.
Yeah.
Very tricky car.
I did.
I did as well. Yeah, God, yeah. First time I drove one, I spun it. Second time I drove one, I spun it. And it's that funny thing where you think, I've caught it, and then sort of the caster on the wheel seems to sort of, and it goes the other way.
Well, no, the main problem was it had very heavy steering. You've always lacked a bit in the shoulder department, Mr. C.
Did have.
So, you just needed to just bulk up a bit, and then you'd be all right. Yeah. Come on, then, let's see your
You must look at lap times, though, Chris, at some point, and then we'll sort of resolve that one. But perhaps another time.
I think we've got a technical there. Sorry, I think we've got a technical at that point. Sorry. Right, off you go, Mr. Cooper, with your two-car garage.
Well, I've done this differently. So, first of all, I've been a bit of a girly swap because I sat down with my boys and we looked on collecting cars.
Right.
And we just looked to say, because otherwise you start thinking about what you'd like. Whereas if you go onto the sold bit, there's a sold bit, isn't there?
Yeah.
You just think, what can I have? And you just see all kinds of stuff. So for the sports car, sort of the track car, we found...
Let me stop you there before we start. If you wanted a free cap or a jumper off Edward, he'd just give you one. You know that, don't you?
It's the gilet. It's the gilet.
There's plenty of swag in the cupboard in the office. But
I worked really hard for this, and he couldn't even turn up today.
Oh, what's that?
It's a 1972 RSR IROC replica.
Okay.
It sold for 68k last October. It's got 3.5 super duper beautiful open trumpets on the engine, 385 horsepower. It's done 2,000 miles since it was completely built. It just looks it's road registered. You can take it on the road, take it on the track. If you really wanted to, you could go to Europe in it. But I just thought, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you have that? You'd never think of that unless you went and look at it. So sports car because it's just brilliant. I can't get away from an estate. I know he hasn't got family and a dog, but there was a 2019 E63S Monkey. You and I really like this.
Oh, that's
2019 E63S, 3,600 miles. 64k.
It's a good car.
So I've got 3 cars. I've got 3 cars in my 2-car garage because I had £10,000 left over. And then we found a 1994 BMW 840 Ci. Not very. I won't show you the photograph. It's not a very good printout. But it was that, whatever that Cinnabar red.
Yeah.
840, 70,000, 65,000 miles. 10,500. It sold. Actually, it sold today.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yesterday. So
sold yesterday.
How
for 10,500.
How are
it? Just quickly in London.
Have you done a pixel check on that dashboard?
It's a complicated car, the 8 Series. We need to discuss that.
Yeah, it's
point.
a very.
I love it. It's £10,500.
Right, okay. I feel like that moment in Withnan and I when they sit down for the Sunday lunch after they've cooked the lamb, and Monty sits back, my boys, because this is just exceptional work. And I fear that in bringing up the rear, that's not a Monty joke, I'm now going to disappoint you all by offering something a bit mundane. So I've agonized. I've gone method. I know Neil does. He goes method to do these things. He actually lives these people's lives for a week. And I've done the same thing for about 15 minutes this morning. And I've reached the conclusion that this guy, he's a piston header. He's had to think about whether he was going to have a personalised number plate that was his piston head call sign on the car. You know, he's that into the subject, and he's got an @ with his Instagram on the window sticker on his current car. So he loves the community thing, but he also views motor cars as a way of presenting who he is to the world and the choices he makes and what that says about him. And this is a conservative man who saves his pennies. He wants to demonstrate to people that he's flamboyant. So I do think he looked at a 550, but I think he went and drove it. And then he read the buyer's guides and he thought, if this shits itself, I can't do it. And he's spoken to his mates and he's gone on the forums and he's direct messaged me on Instagram and I didn't reply. And I'm sorry, but I was busy. And it's terrible. And he's gone out and he's promised himself he's not going to buy a GT3 because that's what everyone does. Made the mistake of driving beautiful Guards Red Club Sport 996 Gen 2 GT3, the one, and he's gone. Oh, I've got to. And he's
that's a winner.
He's 80 grand.
Yeah, and he's gone. Look, it's knocking on for 100. It's a really, really good one. Let's get him up the top here. He wanted the best, and it's a stunner. Compression check's good. Everything's wonderful. So he's got that. He also does. He does want something to like now and again. Likes a bit of surfing. He's thought about mountain biking. It's an estate car. It has to be an estate.
He's from Manchester. Can you surf in Manchester?
Yeah, they've got
actually North Wales.
You've got one of those wave things up there.
Anyhow, yeah, that's true.
Don't spoil the narrative. If you'd applied this to Blade Runner, they'd have made the bloody film, would they? Jesus, man. Right.
Keep going.
So I would say it's a used B7 RS4 because I know it's conventional. He's ended up with double German. This is his chance to show to people that he was windswept.
Cool.
But he's ended up with 2 German cars that are considered to be quite boring. But fundamentally, he goes to sleep at night satisfied and not worried. There you go. That's my view on it.
That's actually irritating. It's a B7 RS4, and yeah,
estate is
yes, estate.
Yeah.
He gets a surfboard on the top. By the way, the actual line from Widnell and I is perhaps we 3 are the last vestiges of beauty.
Yes. Yes. No, but he does have yes, but before that he says, my boys. But the other bit you're conflating with when they're walking along and they're framed by that bit of wood and he starts talking about du longtemps. It's a Baudelaire poem, isn't it? There we go. Everyone thinks we're completely mad now. Right. I'm going to go back to the group so I can work out exactly what we're doing first on our second on our agenda. Right. Company cars, people. Now, I have to put my hands up here and say my interpretation of company cars is probably quite different to some of yours. I have had company cars, but they came about in a weird way, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But Chris Cooper, tell us about your company car experiences.
So company cars is a bit of a dying thing, really, isn't it? Because
sadly,
they appeared in the 70s. They became quite big in the 70s when the top rate of tax was 83% or whatever it was. And employers were trying to find ways of giving their employees benefits in kind or salary. So company cars kind of appeared. So my first company car was in 1990. When I worked for Deloitte, it was Touche then, but Deloitte's now, as a management consultant, a young pup management consultant. Everybody had a 205 GTI 1.9 as a company car, like Neil did. Yep. Everybody had one. And I thought, do you know what? Rear-wheel drive is disappearing. I can always have a front-wheel drive car. I want something different. So I had, please don't, I'm almost too embarrassed to say this. I had a facelift Mark 1 MR2 in red. It wasn't the T-bar because the scheme didn't go that far. So I had the 1.6 litre, 123 horsepower, rev to 7,007 RPM.
Was it good?
I thought I was cool about it. So I didn't spin it the first day I had it. I spun it the first week I had it because it's obviously mid-engine and I'd only driven front-wheel drive cars, front-engine front-wheel drive cars. So somewhere on the motorways around Mesa where I was living at the time, I thought I'll just try a bit, and it's sort of like, why am I pointing back the way I've just come? That's extraordinary. So
I had good reviews. Those cars. I remember the review.
It's a lovely car.
Performance car.
Yeah, it was. I really liked it. I remember the first time we had some sort of big off-site conference beginning of that year, and one of my colleagues, Heather, who was a bit older than me, she just joined the firm a bit, and she had a white MR2. And we're at one of those hotels at the NEC, and you know that big roundabout on the M40, whatever it is.
Yeah.
She said, "Would I drive it?" So I drove it like a total around this roundabout, just sliding everywhere. I think it was one, but I thought I've got to have one of these. So I had that for 3 years, and then my second company car was a Mark II MR2. Same color, same red.
You know the famous car magazine cover where they took 20 frames off the light box. They had when we used to use that wasn't film, what do they call it? Transparency film, wasn't it? And you put it on the light box, and they took 20 frames of an MR2 spinning, and they said, and the headline was "How Toyota Ruined the MR2."
That's right, yeah. So I know that.
Was that the case or not?
I know that's true. I can tell you how I know that's true, because one of the things obviously you were never allowed to do was take your company car on a track day. So obviously I took my company cars on track days, and I was at Brands Hatch in 94, Grand Prix circuit in my Mark II MR2, going down, in fact, my twin brother, some of you know my twin brother, and I was standing on the infield watching him go past, that's a lovely car, that, isn't it? As he went over the Brown Paddock Hill, it just swapped ends and did 2 complete 360s down the hill, flat spotted the tyres. And when I handed the car back with his flat spot, I tried everything to get him, like doing donuts and stuff. Couldn't get rid of the flat spots. Couldn't own up to why all 4 tyres are flat spot until I handed it back. And the guy who took it came back half an hour later and said, all the tyres are flat spotted. So I'm sorry, whoever you were, that chap, all those years ago, that's why the tyres were flat spotted. I took my company car track day. Don't do this at home.
Neil, Clifford, give us a company car story.
You know, the company car for me was by far the biggest ever career event that took place in my life.
I think that's the case for everyone, isn't it?
It is.
Of our generation, it was the way that you expressed yourself. The choice was agonizing.
Yeah, it was nothing has ever beaten that. You know, I might be called a director now, I might earn more money. It's nowhere near as good as being handed the company car list by the HR department in 1989 and been told, you are grade 5, but also if you can pay more on direct debit and go up a level to grade 4.
I did that.
It was just fucking magnificent.
Yeah.
There's no better day in my life. So I ordered because I had one before when I got this sort of Ponzi job, and I had that 1.9, but that was someone else's. They'd been made redundant. It was used. That was the 1.9. A Renault 5 Turbo GT Raider edition, which was the navy blue car with the navy blue wheels. Picked it up from the Renault dealership in Portsmouth, which is where I'm from and where I was living at the time. I was the dog's bollocks. There's nothing because it's fast, that car.
I had one. Yeah.
It's so fragile, so bloody fragile. And the problem is I was on 20 grand or something and had a company car. So it was disproportionate I had this flashy car and no money, basically.
Yeah.
And I had, because I wasn't at the level where I got a petrol card, which was another position in the company.
That's management. Yeah.
I didn't have the petrol card, just the car. I didn't have the money to put the petrol in it. So my good friend, Paul Sweetenham, again, I mentioned Paul Sweetenham again, he was another level. He was a grade 5. He had a petrol card. So I used to have to travel around with him for him to fill out my car of petrol, because I was, I had an MBNA gold card on 39% APR with $5,000 on it. So I had no access. I get paid and I was still overdrawn. I was completely skint, but I had this fucking great car, but I couldn't afford to do the expenses. So I had to travel around with him for him to fill it up. But it was just a mega experience, never to be beaten, frankly. And I'm sad for the current younger people that they don't have that.
Yeah, it's gone.
I mean, what is the excitement now that you can work from 2 days from home instead of 1 or something?
Yeah,
probably. Yeah.
And I never had it, but I always remember seeing my friends when they got the list, even the ones that weren't that, this is key, even the ones that didn't like cars that much were captivated by it, and they'd research. And actually, by association, they massively helped my trade, because at least once every 2 years, everyone would go out and buy all the car magazines to do their research, wouldn't they, on the car they might get?
Yeah.
They probably gave us another 100,000 sales over that period.
But there were so many cool Japanese cars on the list. I mean, I'm of the belief you can't really love a Japanese car. You can only admire it, frankly.
I love my MR2.
But there was the Celica GT4.
Yeah.
There was the Supra. There was the 200 SX. These fantastic cars. The Mitsubishi, whatever, 3000 GT. That was
stick to Toyota. Yeah.
Yeah. There was all that on the list, but I sort of went, what's the fastest 0 to 60 that I can, basically 0 to 60, 7.5, 138 miles an hour in a Renault 5 turbo. I mean, I'd made it basically.
Manish, have you ever had a company car?
No. So sadly, medical school to NHS. You don't get company cars in the NHS, but I have a teeny tiny company car story. I took a year off before university, and I was looking for a job before I traveled, like many people did. So this is 85 going into 86. And the Southern Electricity Board had a job for somebody who wanted to work in their transport department. Had to be computer literate. Now, very sad part of my portfolio is I used to write video games. I mean, I was so nerdy. I did double maths, physics and chemistry with an emphasis on writing video games. I mean, I used to just love writing video games. So I thought I'll apply for this job. I put a suit on and I got this job. And the reason why they chose me for this job was because I had to work with the computer. And the things I had to do with the computer would track all the mileage of all the company cars, license all the company cars, but also do the insurance claims for all the company cars. And it was great. I mean, it's the amount of data I had. So this is the Southern Electricity Board in Basingstoke. But the other bit of access I had was to the salaries of everybody who worked at the Southern Electricity Board, because you'd have everything, because the salaries patched onto which company cars they could get.
Brilliant.
And so I had to let them know. So I was the guy at the end of the computer who said to you, here's your list of potential company cars because you're at grade whatever. And the highest paid man in October 1985 at the Southern Electricity Board that I had access to his salary for, he was one of the kind of assistant managers, was £19,155 a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he had a Ford Granada 3-litre, dark green with velour. And that was his company's car.
Yes,
that was
nice.
And I had to tax it. I had to go out, get the disc and complete its mileage every week. And I used to send him his petrol allowance, to put that all into the computer. It was a job of immense power. I felt I had a fleet of company cars.
I had a mate whose dad had exactly that car, the Mark I Granada 3-litre gear in
Sweeney one.
In green. And he used to basically buy out-of-date Mr. Kipling's cakes from the pig farmers, because obviously Kipling sold them to the pig farmers in Portsmouth and then would sell them on Portsmouth market for like 100% markup. these moldy cakes. But he had the coolest car in Portsmouth, basically, this Granada, and it had a mobile phone with the roundy dialy thing. This was 80, 85, 86 on left score, a phone inside a Granada Mark 1 3-litre gear.
What is that, a bit like Bodie and Doyle? And
basically, yeah, it's a Sweeney.
Sweeney.
Yes.
Well, and the whatever they were called,
the lad. There's a lad that works in the garage next to one of my lockups who's got one on the road. Dailies it. It's one of the great car shapes. It's so well proportioned. Even now, when you look at it, it's a great looking car.
The Mark 1.
Yeah, the Mark 1. I mean, the bar of soap one afterwards.
Yeah.
So much. Have you seen, but just on that quick aside, so the Sweeney 2, I have to recommend this movie, okay? Written by Troy Kennedy Martin, probably the funniest caper film ever. And D.S. Regan gets appointed a very, very upper class driver. That's his driver.
Yes.
Do you remember that? And the guy's a vegetarian. I mean, you've never seen.
That's right. So God, that's a really good. I'll have to look at that.
He literally leans into his glove compartment to go and get something to eat. And he says, "What's that?" He goes, "Well, I think it's a carrot, sir." And he says, "Well, what are you doing with the carrot?" "Well, that's my lunch, sir." And he puts up with this for a while. And he goes,
"Yeah, we have Mars bars.
Tomorrow, I want to see that full of ham sandwiches, chocolate bars, and a cup of coffee. Never want to see it. You've got to see
and
that.
Some villains.
And some villains."
Kennedy Martin did, because he also did Z cars. He had a real car thing. He obviously did famously. He wrote the Italian Job.
Italian Job, exactly. No, genius. Brilliant car. He very sadly died quite young, and he also wrote Edge of Darkness, didn't he, as well? Yes.
But yeah, very great car pedigree.
Yes.
So Chris, you were basically writing and doing the tests almost for these cars that we were dreaming about, right?
But I did have a company car experience, and it's a reasonably amusing anecdote. It doesn't take long, so I'll share it with you. So I started at Haymarket Publishing as a junior road tester, salary £12,000 in 1998, which really was not enough to live off in London. And it was tax at source. I didn't even understand how tax worked. So my first complete month of working at Autocar, I thought I was going to get £1,000. It didn't even occur to me that the Exchequer would want some of that to pay for pavements and other stuff, because I was a proper fuckwit. And my payslip came through, and it said £611. 611, but my rent was £500, and it said £611. And I thought, right, I really don't understand this. This doesn't make any sense. So I spoke to Steve Sutcliffe and went, well, how does this work? He went, well, you got to pay your tax. I went, oh yeah, of course, yeah, tax, yeah, I knew all about that. And he went, and I went, but it still doesn't make sense, because I'm paying at that point, a lower rate taxpayer was about 22% or something. It was very low. National insurance hadn't been ramped up. Anyhow, what I saw at the bottom was company car tax allowance. Ooh. So what had happened was, almost to the month that I joined, before that, every journalist that was PAYE snuck under the radar. It was basically it wasn't a benefit in kind. You just drove the test cars. They came in and left. No one gave a shit. The revenue knew it meant nothing. But we'd recently had a change of government and a change of code, if you remember. In 97, Mr. Blair rolled in, and the company I worked for was owned by a man called Mr. Heseltine. And they just came after him. And no other car magazines, no other car media group had ever paid car tax for the next 5 years. It was just Haymarket. We got hammered politically, just got nailed. But they did the calculation initially on a Mercedes C220. There was the calculation, and we lobbied hard. And I wrote part of the document for it to be a Ford KA, and they did agree in the end. But even so, £611 couldn't live off it. Absolute shambles. That was an unriveting story. Let's move on. Okay, lads, this is the big one for me. This year.
Oh, no.
And Mr. Clifford, don't say anything until I've got this first bit out. Lewis or George? Who's it going to be? I'm not talking about championship. Who's going to outpoint who this year? Manish, off you go.
I think it'll come down to the car. If the car is a stunner and is in with the chance of a sniff of the championship, I don't think George will see Lewis for dust, because I think Lewis will be highly, highly, highly motivated. And if you just look at drivers through their careers, they want to qualify well, then they want to make it to the podium, then they want to win races, then they want to win championships. Lewis is on the threshold of maybe winning his 8th. And I think if it's even 51-49, the difference between them in terms of talent and output, I think you can bet your bottom dollar Mercedes will be favoring Lewis, because having Lewis at the age of 37 winning his magic 8th, sorry, Neil, winning his 8th is going to be the most important thing for Mercedes. So I think motivationally, he can do it. He can do it in terms of his ability, and I think Mercedes will get behind him. If, on the other hand, the Mercedes is a bit of an also around this year, I guess anything is possible, then I just don't see Lewis wanting to wake up and push a dog that hard. And I think George has got everything to gain from that, just as he did last year. So that's what I think. I think Lewis, no doubt about it, if the car's decent.
I think it'll be closer. So I'm reading something that Karun Chantuk wrote, turn of the year, and Lewis did turn up a bit more last year when the car got better. But in quali from Spa onwards, so Lewis out-qualified George 7-2 after Spa, but the average dry weather quali difference was only about half a hundredth, 0.057 second. Very, very close. And right at the end of obviously Brazil, probably Abu Dhabi as well. I mean, George was, Karun reckoned that he was his number 2 driver for the whole year. And I think it's right. I mean, I would have put George number 2 after Max last year. I don't get the sort of, I just don't have the confidence and feeling that Charles is ever going to really be a Max or a Lewis rival. I think you're right though, Manish. I think you're right, Manish. If the car is really, really there, I think he probably will win. And I think Mercedes, even though they're very, very even-handed, would probably want him to win. And I think they are still different. They're not like Nico and Lewis were 7 years ago. But this is George's 5th season. So if the car is really, really good, I think it will be the most interesting pairing of the year, because I do think George is really, really quick. And he's quite confident. He's played a very good game so far. There are loads of times he could have chucked it around last year. Had that quite dodgy bit around Singapore and US and Mexico, where he made a few mistakes, but then put it right again. He's the real deal. But yeah, I think if the car is there, you'd have to bet an awful lot on Lewis not getting it. I think he'd get it.
Can I just turn us back? Can I turn us back a year? So they launched last year's car. You guys all know what it's called. I don't know the designation.
W13 last year. Funny that, yeah.
Had the that shrink wrap sense of it literally being a small car that's just wrapped in cling film, and they've not done much else with it. It was an amazing looking vehicle. I heard, this might be urban myth, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I heard that part of the reason why Lewis was so far off the pace at the beginning of the season was he was sacrificial. He was trying quite crazy setups to try and unlock this car. And they didn't want to charge George with that because he was new to the team and inexperienced. So quite often, Lewis was changing stuff as late as he could before Parc Fermé, before going into the race. They were changing stuff. The car was basically like he turned up on Thursday. I think that I can believe that's the case.
I've heard a slightly different version of that, which was that right at the beginning of the year, George was just naturally more comfortable with it because he'd be driving a Williams. I mean, he must have. So I think Lewis actively decided, I'm not happy with, and he clearly was less happy with the car. So he actively decided, let's try some different things. How bad can this car be? So I think at the first part of the year, I think Lewis was, from what I've read, was slightly less comfortable, tried more dramatic things. I don't think it was an active case from Mercedes saying, right, we're in the poo. Lewis, you're the experienced driver. Take one for the team. George, get what you can about it, but Lewis, you're going to try F1.
Toto did allude to that in a press conference or in an interview last year that they were using Lewis for more extreme.
I wonder whether that was just protecting Lewis.
Yeah.
So who knows? But yeah, I think it will be fun this year.
And there were some big rumours, weren't there, in Bahrain the year before when George was driving, kind of with the toe of his shoe cut off because he was so torn.
Yeah.
But that Lewis was really, really, really absolutely freaked out by George's performance. That there were even rumors saying, "Oh my God, I've got no job next year." this guy has shown just how brilliant he is. I'm with you, Chris, in the sense that I think George is for sure he's the real deal. But I think, as I say, just looking at Lewis, he's been racing since 2007.
Yeah.
So we're about to go into what, season 16, aren't we? And that's a long time to be racing at the very, very sharp end of Formula One. And I think you do it at this level because you really want to establish something completely new about yourself. And that's all I would say, that, you know, motivationally, and I think motivation's a huge thing in getting a car right.
Yeah.
I would say motivationally, this is all about how good that Mercedes is. I think if the Mercedes is good, as I said, it would be really amazing to see a brilliant Mercedes with a massive dogfight between the two of them. And that really would be amazing if it really is rat-a-tat-tat.
I think we'll see a lot more of that this year than last year, because I do think I bumped into James Allison at an event in the middle of the year last year, and I said to him, so this is really boring to ask you this because everyone asks you this, but what's the problem with the car? He said, generally, if we knew that, we'd be fixing it and kind of think we know roughly where it is. And we'll get there. He was, you know, I think like a lot of the lead engineers, very scathing about the rule set, which is, you know, it's tending everybody into this point where there's no ride height, stiffest car in the world. It's a backward step in terms of the rule set. Don't think anybody was a big fan of it. But this year they must naturally have gone forward. I think all of the mood music is they've gone forward. I mean, Lewis is, I do think I watched some of the 07 season where, you know, I think he drove better in 07 than 08. In some respects, I wish he'd won 07 and Felipe had won 08, because that would have been such a wonderful story, particularly that last race. In 07, he really should have won. I mean, I know Monkey, you and I talked about at the time, that race in Brazil when suddenly, mysteriously, the car stopped. And Manish, close your ears for a minute. Monkey and I we were racing in Germany the weekend after. We said, there's a short man in a white shirt with a white cat on his lap. He made that happen.
Wait, can I just say that I did actually ask Bernie that? I said, I've met so many people who think you've got a Bernie button. And whenever you think motor racing gets boring, you press the Bernie button.
We thought that.
And suddenly it all gets really exciting. He said, oh, bollocks. You know, he said,
he said that because what he means is it's not a button, it's a lever. He works on technicalities, wouldn't he? He goes, no, it's not a button, it's a lever.
Listen, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think it was 23 seconds. Something happened. All the gears they did some kind of reset. All the gears came back, and suddenly Lewis came exactly where he needed to come, not to quite win the championship. You're right.
Exactly. I rest my case.
Yeah. I think it will be. I think it will be Lewis's year. I think he'll be so motivated. Obviously, you're right, Manish. It's all about the car, probably, but I think this is his year. I think this is his last year, really, to bloody get the 8. I hope he gets the 8. Obviously. I think this is his, what was it, Lauda's 84 or something, is, you know, this is his last chance to be that top of the tree in the whole sport. And I think he's going to do every single bit of sweat and tears to do it. You know, he's a guy that doesn't, I'm not technically knowledgeable on the sport as you guys, but he doesn't make many mistakes, right?
Not now. He's a
bloody brilliant.
That's a really salient point, and that's what I wanted to say as well. If you've done a bit of racing, the reason why you really admire Formula One drivers is they've got this thing that is designed to make you make a mistake. It's got far too much power, and it's a monster. You can't see out of it, and they're huge. I was with one last week when I was doing the Valkyrie drive. I mean, they're just so big. How they drive them the way they do at close quarters, I do not know. And a modern F1 driver is defined by how few mistakes they make. It's a given that they're very quick, that they wouldn't be in the formula unless they were super, super quick. But the great ones somehow find a way. They create their own luck. You know, when they're on top of their form, they get luckier and luckier. That always happens. But the one thing we've not seen from George is him under consistent pressure. Because he's had his first year at Mercedes where he was the new kid and he wowed everyone. But I think the fact the car was shit took the pressure off him during the year, because all he could do was drag the best out of the car. But if they turn up with something a bit spiky this year and he's got Lewis, it's going to be fascinating to see how he deals with sustained pressure from Lewis in a different way. Because pressure of coming 5th or 6th means bugger all to anyone. But to come 1st or 2nd and you're fighting for a championship, and I suspect I think he'll handle the pressure. I think he's going to be Lewis's biggest problem all year. Because I agree with Chris, he is the real deal.
Yeah, he's good. Yeah, he's good. And I like him. He's British. He's, I don't have the sort of Max problem that the George is. I'm on George's side. He's a great protege. He's a great guy to take over. But we all need Lewis to get 8, right?
We got there.
The Lewis.
Can I just say that there was just one thing that Neil said, which I think may well be the case this year. It would be very interesting if it was the case. He's talking about, could this be like Lauda's 84? And the idea, and the thing about Niki Lauda in 84 was he was out-qualified by Alain Prost, and Alain Prost won more races, but he won the championship. And that would be, that would be such a weird way if Lewis won it like that. If if he wasn't quite as quick and he didn't win as many races, but he came out as champion, that would be kind of weird.
Well, I watched it last night. There's an amazing documentary. I don't know if you've heard of it, called Lucky, about Bernie Ecclestone. You must watch it. It's on Discovery Plus. It's free. You don't have to pay anything. Okay,
good.
And it's. I watched it last night. That's it. The 84, and Lauda just didn't make mistakes. He's just, he's a metronome, and I think Lewis is similar. I think he will win it via less mistakes.
Okay, that could go on, and we'll obviously have plenty more fun chat next week. So, Chris Cooper, for the last 3 weeks, has been badgering us with a bête noire he has about a particular type of classic car that is emerging on the scene quickly. This is the electric car that's had its gizzards ripped out. It has been eviscerated. It's been pulled apart, and it has been eviscerated is the wrong word, isn't it? That's your skin coming off. It's had a hysterectomy. It's had everything pulled out of it, and then electric gizzards go in. It's the EV converted classic car. Your soapbox is underneath your feet. Take 2 steps onto it and tell us why you hate the EV converted classic car.
Well, where do you start? So I discussed it with both my boys, and they said it better than me. And Cameron said to me, it's the worst thing to ever happen to the automotive world. It's worse than communism. Even communism gave us the Lada Niva, and that's got more character and is more endearing than some electrically butchered classic car. Just no. We talked about electric cars before. There is definitely a place for them. I've had an electric car. There is, even today, even Rolls-Royce said today, after 2030, no more V12. Everything from 2030 will be pure EV. And Ford has clearly said today, we're shutting down more facilities in the UK because the dash for EV needs to go faster and faster. This is not a Luddite view. Most classic cars do 500 miles a year, 1,500 miles a year. They produce no emissions whatsoever. It's a bit like saying, you've got an old family pet, an old dog, to say, oh, it's not really going to last very long, is it? So tell you what, I'm going to take the heart, literally take the heart out of my pet dog. I'm going to put some animatronics in it so it lasts a bit longer. No, put the classic car down.
That's just awful. If you're a dog lover, it's
just awful.
My dog's just done a bolt for the door.
It's not, I love EVs, but who would put an EV in a classic Mini? Or I've seen Land Rovers. The worst though is this Tesla Rossa. I'm sure they're lovely people, I'm sure, but there are people who are taking engines out of Tesla Rossas and putting Tesla drivetrains in them. It's called a Tesla Rossa.
That's shocking. We can't mention the famous wedding here, can we?
Yeah, we can. Of course we should.
Yeah, you can.
You can. Yeah.
Surely, even if you clearly we're petrolheads, we love. We're not massive lovers of electric cars, but surely it's bad for the environment. Surely it's a logical thing that you're digging all this stuff out of the ground in Africa, you're shipping it here. Surely it's genuinely, someone should do the maths before people are running around sticking electric motors in 911s and Land Rovers and saying how wonderful it is for the planet. It's much worse for the planet, surely.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
I'll tell you on a practical level, I've driven more of these things than you have probably. And without exception, I say that guardedly, they're really disappointing, because they do something that you don't need from an old car. They become very, very fast, and no one needs a Triumph Spitfire, which is one that I put together for us. No one needs a Triumph Spitfire that has 450 horsepower. That's what I ended up with, and it's 450, I think it had at the back wheels. And we had to ramp it back.
Shit.
I kept the gearbox. We put a gearbox in it, and when you had it in, so you had the same torque throughout all the gears. It was just a lever you moved around for the sake of it. It didn't do anything really, but it would spool up at 80 miles an hour on the motorway and then try and spit you off. So you give something old a performance it doesn't need. Okay,
correct.
But what you also do, and this is why I'm not as anti-electric car as some. I can see a place for them,
Yeah,
and I find some of the engineering. I find some of the engineering that has come about through their genesis fascinating. And I also really admire some of the byproducts. The ultimate byproduct of electric cars for me is a strange one, is NVH, noise, vibration, yeah. So basically, when you've got a gearbox engine rattling around in a car, it covers off so many bass noises that you don't know. It hides them. It's basically a way of having a cloak over screws and stuff that rattle around. In an electric car, you cannot do that. So you have to screw them together even better. Yeah. Everything has to be damped. Nothing can touch or rub. If you take the engine out of a classic car and you put an EV powertrain in it, you would not believe the panoply of awful noises that suddenly appear. Everything is like a dying rodent. It's just squeaking, scraping. You know, when you hear a Vixen being rogered at night, they all sound like that. It's just horrific.
I've often thought it sounds exactly like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just not a good place to live.
It reminds me of those days, Neil, you and I all must remember this, where we had cars that did break down and you had to be towed off the motorway by your dad or your mate. And you suddenly realize, cracky, my car sounds dreadful. That's what EV classics would sound like. It sounds like you've been towed off the motorway because your car's died.
Yes.
But I'll give you one exception. So I did a film. It must have been a broadcast. I don't watch Top Gear because I can't stand the way I sound or look or do anything actually. But there was we had a load of these things, and Paddy drove a short wheelbase. I think it was like an 88 or something inch Series 1 Land Rover that had a full Tesla power pack in it, and it on one of the runs, one acceleration runs, the front wheels came off the ground. I have to say there was something. The idea of having that down by the beach on the north coast of Cornwall, there's no great joy in having in the original engine in a Series 1 Land Rover of that type. It's not a V8, so I can see that swap might make sense. But the idea of taking the powertrain out of a 964, taking a Metzger flat six out of a car to put in an electric motor, I don't get it.
It should be illegal.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, which plastic surgery would you like to see performed on Marlene Dietrich, or on
that's a good analogy,
or on Elizabeth Taylor? I mean, what bit of those doesn't work for you?
Yeah.
What would you like to see? Was James Dean's were his ears too big? It's just it just makes no sense.
I'm not sure, and I'm not, even though there was one at the wedding, and there's been quite a bit of clever placement. I don't think it's catching on. I respect the people that have set up a business to do this, and I do wish them the best. But I just don't think. I think people that want to buy those cars have enough of an understanding that those vehicles have a soul. They really do, and that's soul. The beating heart of the vehicle, such a cliche, is the engine, and it doesn't matter if it has to be a really crap engine for it to spoil the experience in an old car. It pretty much has to be a Trabant or a Series 1 Land Rover. But anything else, even a Triumph Spitfire,
lovely little engine.
I know. Yeah. I do think that the way that you interact with that internal combustion engine is so important. So I don't know. It's really strange.
I think people won't admit, though. People won't admit that it's bad for the planet. That's the thing. You can buy the best 964 in the world for 80 grand, and then the electric one's 325,000 or something absolutely ridiculous. But also, it's worse for the planet. Even after, I've got 3 kids, I have to try to be sensible at some point in my life. Therefore,
Out of interest, what
we all
do
have
they
to be
do with the
conscious
old
of emissions, but surely it's much worse.
But Neil, what do they do with the engines that they rip out? That's what I wondered. I mean,
What they do is they all dress up like the Spanish Inquisition from Monty Python, and they burn them. They have a ritual where they burn these horrible engines to get rid of them. But obviously they emit some emissions.
Oh, they'd be on eBay. They'd be on eBay for 20 grand.
Coffee table.
Yeah, they'd be selling them for sure.
So do you know what? If this is Room 101, I've been now saying to Chris Cooper, yeah, that can go in the bin, because I was open-minded when I first drove some of them. I was a bit blown away by the speed, but then I quickly realized that the process of making the rest of the car handle the speed would be uneconomical. So you couldn't get big enough brakes behind the little wheels to stop the bloody things. The tires they were dangerously fast. And then I was just in this Trans Spitfire for 3 days, and the noises it made, I mean, it was horrific. So yeah, you can have that.
Okay, we're here to help.
To end, I thought we should just make some music suggestions. You can go down any route you want, but I think we want to just provide you chaps and chapesses, if you're sitting down, just with a couple of tunes that you might want to plug into your car. So I'll kick off by saying, this last week, I've been mostly jet lagged, not feeling great. I've been in Hong Kong and Bahrain in the space of 9 days. Massive place drop. There you go. So interesting. And I've had a couple of tunes on in the car that when I wake up in the morning, they just make me feel better. So try these, all right? I started off, I've got a little playlist, just six tunes for you. Bit of Stevie to start with. I'll start with Do I Do, because that's just a lovely tune. It just warms my heart, Do I Do. It's got great rhythm, and I always smile, warm, little cockle warmer. Then I go straight to For Once in My Life, because that is joyous, but also has the ability to make me cry, because it is such a beautiful song. Then I want to just switch it up a bit. So I've been doing a bit of Lenny Kravitz, Always on the Run, because I just somehow that gets me going. I'm a massive Jamiroquai fan. You know, cards on the table. I've met him a few times, and Neil's a mate of his. But honestly, I'm a huge fan. But he did a song called Cloud 9 a few years ago, which is a belting track that no one really knows about. So go and listen to that on Spotify and watch the video where he's slagging about in a beautiful Mercedes as well. But Cloud 9 is a great tune. And then to end it, when I arrive at the meeting, I think In Between Days by The Cure just reminds me of my childhood, and it's just another feel-good song. So if you put those on your hi-fi in the next 7 days, I guarantee each one of them will improve the journey you're on.
Good calls.
Right. Well, we music in cars, it probably is the other amazing thing about cars, isn't it? It's the place you listen to music. It's your third space in your life. You've got the home, you've got work, and in the middle and at weekends, you've got this car. And the car is the best place to listen to music. Ideally, and I'm a bit of a 90s boy, really, on a CD. CDs sounded so much better than Spotify, Apple Play bollocks, frankly, even though it's sort of, you save yourself a lot of money. What would I do? I would to suggest something, I would actually, Radio 6 last week did a whole day on Kate Bush. And, you know, Kate Bush was discovered at the age of 15, where she had already written, including The Man with the Child in His Eyes at 15, 50 songs by the age of 15. She's one of the UK's total geniuses. I would listen to Hounds of Love. I think it was 85, 86. It was, you know, peak life for me. I was just about to get my company car. Actually, there's a song called Hello Earth, which I think is the second last song. If you put that on in a convertible car on a September dusk evening as the stars are just coming out, it's the closest where I would be completely contented with death. If someone said, this is your death row drive, you are going to be electrocuted by your testicles in half an hour's time, I'd be completely happy with all of that, just if I could listen to Hello Earth by Kate Bush in a convertible Porsche, probably. So everyone should go and listen to the Hounds of Love, the album. And what resonates there, cracking choices, is this idea that actually the music so often completes the experience. And if you look back at the experiences, if you hadn't had the music, it wouldn't have been as good, would it? No, it wouldn't. Music is, I think, for all of us, hopefully, it's been the I suppose the story of our lives. You can put every element of your life to music. You remember when you were listening to Shiny Happy People by REM, driving around Italy with my now wife, listening to The Cure in a Volkswagen Corrado G60 with no air conditioning. You remember all these very specific moments, and they're all connected to music.
Yeah.
Manish.
Oh, I create a little wistful playlist. I like listening to very, I think, movie type evocative music. And the 5 things I put down, but this theme tune from Senna, the main theme that you hear when he wins his race in Brazil, da, 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 and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I love listening to that in a car. I can be going through the worst bits of Slough, but you listen to that and you're in Sao Paulo, it's a warm evening and you've just conquered the universe and life can't get better than this. I love listening to Bach's Goldberg variations in a car. I can listen to all of them, but the aria at the beginning, at the end, that's incredible. It makes me feel like Hannibal Lecter, feel I could kill you and eat you. And it's the most wonderful thing to listen to in a car. Mozart's 23rd Piano Concerto, the second movement, just the quiet piano. That's just a hot, beautiful summer's day.
Even slow down. I'm trying to write these down. I'm on a cold here.
Put them on the WhatsApp group after we finish, Manish. Exactly. We need to get more intelligent by listening to you.
I don't know. You just feel, then from the film Diva, Promenade Sentimentale, just again, simple piano solo gets bigger and bigger, breaks your heart, but the perfect collecting cars, wistful piece of music in a car, and you must just do it. Okay, is the theme to Un homme et une femme. You just da, 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 da. Basically, I become Trintignant. I am driving this very cool Ford Mustang, just testing its steering. I keep letting go of the steering wheel at 150 miles an hour just to track it, grab it again. At the end of that is Anouk Aimée. I love her so much. I want to give her a great big kiss, but it doesn't work out because we just love each other too much for the moment to work. So we go our separate ways, and then we're quite far apart, and then we just run back together and we just make that that's what you should listen to in a car.
Yeah, it's just brilliant. That's just brilliant. We need to show all of these in the detail stuff on YouTube.
We'll find a way.
I gotta be where Manish has been.
That last one, Manish. I agree. That's the great tune. But I had a really random moment where I had to question whether there's a better tune than that for that purpose. And it came about in a Top Gear film. McGuinness was driving a Mark IV Escort convertible a few years ago, and the editor put the most brilliant piece of music. We were in Bognor Regis, and it cuts this lovely long lens tracking shot, and it just pulls out from the headlight of this car. And you're thinking it's playing Engelbert Humperdinck's Quando Quando, which is just so beautiful, and it pulls away from this light unit. You think it's going to be a 250 short wheelbase or something, then it's the worst car ever made in England.
Was it a Clifford conversion?
It was terrible.
No,
it was one with the Targa bar, right, Mark IV.
Oh, the Targa, yes.
Targa bar, because it was so wonky.
The juxtaposition of this almost perfect piece of music against the car made me think that might be the music for that role. But Manish, that was, I've had an out of body experience listening to you there. That was gorgeous. Yeah. Right, Chris, how do you follow that?
I can't follow that, so I'm going to say Meatloaf, Bad Out of Hell. I'll tell you why. It's rite of passage. So it was a summer I left school on A-levels, and my twin brother and I, before we got into cars and stuff, we were really keen on sailing, and we were in the National School Sailing Championships somewhere on a lake in Northamptonshire. And one of the guys from our team, had a wealthy family. His mum had a Ford Escort gear thing, and he had on this cassette tape, and every day going to the lake and going back to the digs at night, we'd play this music. And I bought the tape after that, and the rest of that summer I just played Bat Out of Hell as I was driving like a bat out of hell around leafy Kent where I grew up. And there was every time, and obviously he died, was it last year, before last?
Yeah, recently.
So I introduced my boys to it, and I said that was my rite of passage. And every time I listen to it now, all of those tracks, the long version, the proper version of Bat Out of Hell, It's just such a rite of passage. The other one, which is completely, and I can't listen to music now. When I first went, I was in Portsmouth at college, Neil and I talked about this. A bloke I was in my first year with, he had an MG Midget, and under the seat in the MG Midget, he had a tape player. And in that tape player, he had one track. It was The Chain by Fleetwood Mac. It gets better. He had it keyed up so that when the traffic lights started to go from red to orange, the bass guitar in that piece of the music started to play. And then as he timed, he obviously chose the traffic lights. As the lights went from amber to green, the rhythm guitar started and the rest of it. I can't listen to that music anymore now, he ruined it. So Rite of Passage and Road to Nowhere were my music choices.
I mean, Bat Out of Hell is almost up there with Bohemian Rhapsody, right? So
yeah,
I mean, that is seriously underrated tune.
Yeah, love it.
It came up in I was out with a friend in Hong Kong at the weekend, and I remember when we used to go back the night before we went back to boarding school when we were older. We'd go down to a pub in Bristol, and we'd all go there. We shouldn't have been there, and it was an old jukebox, and that was the first tune you put on because it was so long. It was value. It was VFM, wasn't it? You put your 20p in,
yeah.
You got like 7 minutes of music. Why wouldn't you?
8 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, we had it playing the whole time. Right. As ever, thank you so much to my co-hosts, Neil Clifford, Manish Pandey, and Chris Cooper. I'm sorry about some of those witterings. They really, if it's too much for you, let us know. In the comments section, could you please propose some other music that might make other people just go, oh, I haven't heard that for ages, because I think they're little nuggets of joy. I've got one other thing to leave with you, and that is that if you've got a company car and you tick the box with the fancy hi-fi, you've got yourself a Burmester or a Harman Kardon or a B&O or a B&W, whatever the badge they put on it is. Get the thing wound up, stoke her up, stoke the bass up, get the loudness on, play with the equalizer, and then go onto your music streaming service and get a track called Electrified 2 by Yellow. It is the benchmark for taking a system to where it can go in terms of bass and just raw noise. It's really impressive. You'll enjoy it. Thank you for staying with us and have a lovely week.